Hello, my name is Alex Isles and welcome to Xanten Roman Museum. Hello and welcome back. So when I did my trip to the Netherlands, we also went across the border into Germany, and when we went across the border, we went to Xanten Museum. And Xanten Museum was a fantastic experience, and I wanted to tell you a bit about it. But why not, first of all, you subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you really like learning about maybe history, museums, stuff like that, there's plenty more stuff like this on the channel, and I really think you'll enjoy it here. But why not we just jump right into it and talk about the Roman Museum at Xanten. So, my first experience of arriving, well, we drove from the Netherlands, we travelled over to go to an event at Museum Park Orientalis, which is just outside Nijmegen, and was a fantastic experience as well, and I'll show some videos from that in a little bit. But we were hosted by one of my friends, Robert Vermaat, who was kind enough to say, why don't we go and see this, because it's an amazing Roman museum. So we drove for about an hour, crossed across into Germany, and then went to this museum. Now obviously, as you know, I live in Newcastle. I'm quite used to Roman stuff and finds in museums because as a part of my job I do guided tours of Hadrian's Wall, and I take people to places like Vindolanda, the Roman Army Museum, the Great North Museum Newcastle, Housesteads, Bird Oswald, all of these Roman forts and museums that you see along Hadrian's Wall. But when we arrived there, I realised we were in a very different situation, because there's the difference between a military frontier on the edge of the Roman Empire and an actual Roman city. And this was something that really hadn't struck me until we were inside the museum for probably about 30 to 40 minutes. Because normally when you visit a museum, if in probably about an hour or two you can really get through a museum, and this is when you're going in depth, you look at each find, and maybe like myself you're really into your history and you're looking at the display cases, you're reading them, you're maybe taking some notes, something like that, and you go, oh, that's amazing, that's a really interesting find, that's something really cool. You're really going in depth. Not at Xanten. Xanten was a very different experience for me. Because I reckon if you wanted to do Xanten and you did it that level of sort of interest, you're looking at around 2 to 3 days. It's crazy because it's basically a location where there used to be a village there. But over time, the actual archaeological museum has bought up the entire site of where the actual Roman city was. And when they've bought up the entire site, they've demolished the old houses and people have moved away, and slowly and steadily they're rebuilding it. And I mean, there's no Roman site like that I know of in the UK where, you know, because let's say for instance York, you couldn't demolish York and rebuild Roman York, or London, the same thing. You know, Colchester, Bath, all of those places have settlements on top of them now. We live there. This is a place where people don't live there anymore, and they're able to fully rebuild the city. And also, you don't get a real sense of a size of a city until you're walking through it. And you're going through somewhere, and it's like you go through another field the size of 2 or 3 football pitches. And then you go through another field, and you realise that those are city blocks. And when you're looking at those, you also realise that they haven't been excavated yet. They only excavate when they're going to reconstruct the buildings. So because of that, you know, you're walking around, and this is an entire archaeological site that hasn't been fully reconstructed yet. We went through a part of it where they had reconstructed Roman ships, and we went through and saw a total of 6 reconstructed Roman ships, of which I'm going to do videos on a number of them, and you'll be able to see on the channel quite shortly. And so that was quite amazing as well. You know, these Roman ships that had been reconstructed. And then following on from that, we then went and had lunch at a location where basically it was redone as a Roman hotel, a sort of a guest house where people could come and stay as they travelled through. So that was all fully redone, and there were rooms inside there which were set out so you could eat lying on your side in the Roman fashion. You know, all sorts of things like that were present. And so the amazing thing about the museum was that as we were going through, we saw more and more. Then we went through the actual museum that you can see here behind me. And when we went through that museum, that was a different experience. I was with my friend Francis, who he also has his own page that you can see on Facebook, the Bakari. And Francis turned to me and he was saying to me, you know what, I've never thought I've got to a point where I would see so much Roman stuff that I couldn't see anymore. And obviously, some of you know that in September 2022, I'm actually going back to university to study a master's in archaeology. And they just sort of about halfway through the museum, there was another case of items that, had they been in a Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall, they might have had their own room dedicated to them. It'd be in the center of the room with a glass case all around it, a plinth, maybe even an interpretation video that would tell you a little bit about it. And yet these were just in the corner of the room in a glass case. And I just went, gosh, why am I bothering to study archaeology? I'll never be able to do this to the same level as this place. And so I got a little bit disheartened for a wee bit, and I was just shell-shocked by how much stuff there was here. And it was just overwhelming because I've never been to a museum which had so much stuff in. It has 5 floors. And as you go through every single floor, it takes you through from the earliest period right the way through till the post-Roman period, when you're going into the Merovingian Franks, the 5th and 6th century in that part of western Germany, southern Netherlands, Netherlands as well, and parts of France as well. And you're just suddenly hit by all of these things that, in any other museum, they might each one be their own special thing that would be a highlight. But then I had to sit back, and when we had a little bit of food and drink, and I was able to sort of decompress from seeing another case of beautiful items. And I take photos when I go to museums, and afterwards I looked at it and I took over 350 photos in this museum. That is crazy. Normally I'm like 40, 50 photos if they're really in depth. 350, I was just another beautiful altar, another beautiful piece of glasswork, another amazing case of Roman weapons and armor. I was just taken aback. And then on top of that, we had gone through that museum and I couldn't even remember seeing 6 reconstructed Roman ships. And then after that, we went to the bathhouse, which was reconstructed. We went to houses and shops that were reconstructed. We went to an amphitheater that had been reconstructed. This site is huge and it's not even finished yet. And so if you ever get a chance to visit, I would suggest it. And if you're a massive history fan, possibly book a hotel nearby, because you can't do it in one day. We tried, but I reckon we only saw about 2/3. And any more, had we continued going, I think we would have needed to have a second lunch, or sat down and decompressed. And it didn't help that it was also a beautiful hot warm day of around about 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. So all in all, it was a really overwhelming experience. And I thought, wow, that's something else. And it was one of those ones as well, which, because I've got a passion, and one of my dreams would also be to recreate some of these amazing sites and help to build something like this in the future. That was an inspiration to me, to think of what could happen in Britain on Hadrian's Wall. What could we do if we, slowly and steadily over time, reconstructed one of these Roman forts or a Roman town as well, and actually did something where public could actually come along and engage as the sites not only are excavated but rebuilt as well. And that's one of the things that I really took away from it. Because while I felt overwhelmed on the day, I went away and I thought, wow, that's amazing. I looked through my photos and I thought, wow, that's inspirational. And even though, most of our cities today are built over Roman sites, there's still so many sites, Roman, Anglo-Saxon, medieval, that are now not built over and could be reconstructed to help people to engage with history. And that's something I thought that Xanten did amazingly, because people could engage, they could walk around, kids were climbing around these buildings and experiencing them and being able to see the history and heritage of their province, of where they lived. And I thought that was something that was really precious, and local businesses, local council, all of that stuff were investing into the local area so that this museum park could actually develop this, it was basically a huge park as well, and people were able to engage with the true history of the site. So that's why it may sound gushing, but for me, I was like, wow, this is how we can do archaeology and reconstruction and living history all in one, so that there is something for the future that people can engage with when the archaeology is finished. And so that was a real passion for me. And I hope as you've watched, and then the small clips of the video and the recording I was doing while I was walking around have come up on the screen, and you can get a small glimpse of what I'm talking about, the experience of seeing this amazing site and why I've become quite a fan of it, especially in hindsight. But when I was there, because there was so much, it was just overwhelming, especially for someone who's so passionate about history and archaeology and also museums like myself, where I just sat there and went, oh gosh, I can't possibly ever match up to this. This is nigh on impossible. But then I thought, well, actually, to use the expression, and some of you will go and groan when I say this, Rome wasn't built in a day. In the same way, Xanten wasn't built in a day. There's time and effort and passion from lots of different people that has resulted in this amazing site. So if you get a chance, please do look at it. If you look in the description below as well, I'll put a link to the actual website so you can have a look at that as well. And I really hope you'll enjoy exploring and looking at this and basically just thinking about this amazing site in Germany that I think really shows off what can happen when you bring those different interest groups together. So I really hope you've enjoyed the video today. If you have done, please do like and also subscribe if you haven't already done so, and share the video with your friends. If you'd like to support me further, I do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi account down in the description, but there's no pressure if you don't want to do that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me for another video in the near future.